Transformers movie review. Right, so obviously the Transformers movie came out ages ago. This is another one of my scripted movie reviews. Scripted reviews are when I go back and read old reviews that I wrote years ago on the blog and just try and make a YouTube video out of them for whatever that might be worth. So yes, this is an old review. Although, even at the time I saw the movie, I saw it a year after it came out. I didn't rush out to the theaters or anything. I waited a bit, ended up renting it one night out of curiosity. So I had, before I even saw this, already absorbed everyone else's critiques of the movie. I had read so many bad reviews of it online, and friends of mine who had seen it, I'd heard all of them complaining about this movie. So all of that, of course, would inform my own perspective on it. I guess I should mention briefly my own history with the Transformers franchise. I was a child of the 80s, so Transformers figures big in my nostalgia. Kind of. Although actually, I wasn't allowed to watch the Transformers cartoon show as a kid. My mother disapproved of violent cartoons, and I think she also disapproved of cartoons that were just there to sell toys. As a child, I didn't realize, as a child you don't realize much, do you? Because you assume the way things are the way they've always been. But I guess I obviously didn't realize as a child that these types of cartoons were very new, and it had just come about because of the Reagan deregulation that essentially made it okay for cartoons to be a half-hour advertisement for a toy line, which I think my mother didn't like, and in fact now that I'm an adult I guess I can agree with that to a certain extent. I did not see it that way when I was a kid though. I always used to complain, why can't I watch these cartoons? So anyways, all that is a long way of saying that I was never able to watch the cartoons, and so I don't know this series as intimately as a lot of other people my age. But I definitely have some nostalgia for it. You couldn't escape the Transformers in the 1980s if you were a kid. They were everywhere. Every playground, every toy shop, the Transformers were everywhere. And in fact, I even had some of the toys, despite not being able to watch the cartoon show. And I would see the cartoon show occasionally when I was at friends' houses. Sorry, all of that is just a long way of saying I'm a child of the 80s, and I do have some nostalgia for the Transformers property. But on to the movie itself. And this movie is pretty terrible. It's a Michael Bay movie, so it's got kind of the standard Michael Bay stuff. Namely, there's a lot of action scenes with tons of explosions and car crashes, but I don't know. It's entertaining to watch visually, it keeps me engaged just watching all this stuff blow up and all this stuff fly all over the screen, but it never really gets me on the edge of my seat. I was watching Raiders of the Lost Ark right before I watched this Transformer movie, and maybe that's an unfair comparison because, Spielberg is pretty tough for other people to imitate. But the Jeep scene when he's fighting the Nazis in the Jeep, even though it doesn't have half of the special effects of a Michael Bay movie, you kind of feel like every punch is important. Like Indiana Jones is always kind of one big knock away from being knocked off that Jeep, or then I think he does get knocked off that Jeep at one point. He's got to haul himself back on. You just feel that the stakes, that there are some sort of stakes to the action, which makes it more engaging and which puts you on the edge of your seat a bit more. I don't know quite what it is, but I never really feel that way with a Michael Bay film. I just feel like I'm watching like the fireworks of the explosion and the flying cars and the people running around. Also, I'm sure this would have worked much better on the big screen, like seeing it on the cinema. I rented it as a DVD, so I'm watching it on my television screen, and you do get the sense watching this on a television screen that there was this much larger picture that's just kind of condensed to a screen that's too small for it. But yeah, it just, I always feel like, and again, maybe this is part of the problem of watching it on the small screen. Maybe this would have been better on the cinema. I always feel like I see all this stuff running around, but I feel like I don't really have a clear idea of where the different objects are in relationship to each other when I'm watching a Michael Bay film. Like I can see what's in front of me, but I don't have a clear idea of where they are or what's out of frame, if that makes sense. Okay, so aside from the action scenes, another trademark Michael Bay is you have a plot which is walking a thin line between asking the audience to suspend some disbelief and a plot which is actively insulting the audience's intelligence. I mean, I tried to suspend my disbelief as best I could, but it was hard not to feel like I was being insulted by this plot. And in this case, I think Michael Bay has really outdone himself. The plot of this movie is just ridiculous. The overarching concept story is bad enough. I mean, that's just ridiculous, the basic story. But then none of the twists along the way make any sort of sense either. Now, excuse me. Part of me was tempted when I was writing up this review to just make a list of all the things that didn't make sense. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to waste all my time listing plot holes, and besides which, these are all obvious ones. Like if I could catch them, you could catch them. So you don't really need me to list through these. You can just watch the movie and you'll be able to catch all the plot holes yourself. It's not only the plot though, it's the action scenes as well. I mean, the physical actions just defy credulity. For example, the scene where the giant robots were hiding behind the house was just ridiculous. I mean, the parents really, I couldn't believe that they couldn't notice there were these huge giant robots hiding behind the house. Actually, come to that, I'm not quite sure why it was so important that they had to keep these Transformers secret from the parents anyways. I mean, the movie made it out like this was such a big deal that the parents could not discover the Transformers. I never understood why. But I promised myself I wouldn't get into a long list of plot holes. So I'm just going to leave that part alone. A friend of mine told me about this movie. He said it's an okay movie, except when anyone opens their mouth. In other words, just enjoy the action and ignore the dialogue. I actually think he's being far too generous for it. I'm not sure it was an okay movie even during the action sequences, but he's definitely got a point that the dialogue is terrible. It starts out right from the opening narration and just gets worse and worse as the film progresses. Okay, so those are all my complaints, but is the movie entertaining? Yeah, it is kind of. It's certainly distracting. It's entertaining in a popcorn movie sort of way. There are enough explosions, car chases, and fighting robots to distract you while you shovel the popcorn into your mouth. And in fact, even the terrible plot and the terrible dialogue started to grow on me as I watched the movie. I mean, once I clued into how bad the dialogue was, I actually kind of enjoyed how bad the dialogue was. Like, I would look forward to it when a character would open his mouth just to hear how bad the dialogue was. And then once I started cluing in that the plot was making no sense, I started to kind of enjoy it whenever there was a new plot twist that didn't make sense. It was just interesting to see how incoherent the movie could make itself. And it was even kind of fun to see how blatantly the movie was pandering to the high school demographic. So in this film, the top NSA experts are slackers, teenage slackers who are recruited straight out of high school. I thought, okay, this is pandering a bit to the high school audience, but it was kind of funny how much the movie was pandering. So this movie is kind of on the so bad it's good spectrum, and it would be fun to watch this movie with a group of friends and just make fun of it as you watch it. You know, the old Mystery Science Theater 3000 style. I watched it alone in my apartment, but I still had fun with it. The final battle scene takes place in the city. And by the way, this was another plot twist I didn't understand. Why did the army think it would be a good idea to draw them into battle in the middle of a downtown city? So that's ridiculous enough. But then as the giant robots are fighting each other, like, you know, they'll crash into an office building or something, and it'll go through a reaction of the panicked people in the office. And then I think to myself, well, why are they still working in the office anyways? I mean, I understand, like, okay, maybe the first minute, not even the first minute, the first like 10 seconds of this giant robot battle, people are still working. But then after this giant robot battle has been going on for 15 minutes, surely people at this point are beginning to evacuate the offices, right? You can't just crash into an office building and have people in meetings and boardrooms just turn up and be really surprised. I thought that was ridiculous. It reminded me of those old Godzilla movies I used to watch, where, you know, Godzilla's destroying the city, and people are just running around and not seeming to know where to go, or people are still in the business meetings. And I thought, oh, this is ridiculous. It's just as bad as those old Godzilla movies. And then I thought to myself, wait a minute, I used to love those old Godzilla movies. You know, when I was 12, 13, and those old Godzilla movies from the 1960s were used to be rerun on cable, TNT or TBS at the time, I believe. I used to love them. Not even in an ironic way, or not even in a making fun of how bad the special effects are way. I used to like genuinely enjoy the movie for what it was. And then I thought, there are lots of people who are 12 or 13 years old today who are going to love this Transformers movie. Or who were 12 or 13 years old when it came out. Or, yeah, you know what I mean. So that's obviously Michael Bay's target audience. And those people will ensure that this movie does well and is enjoyed by the people it's meant to be enjoyed by. And, you know, if a grumpy old man like me can't enjoy it, I'm not really in the target audience for it, I guess. So I guess that's my conclusion, is this is a perfectly fine movie if you're 12 years old. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with 12-year-olds having a movie they can enjoy. So, yeah. I'll just leave it at that. No need for an adult to ever watch this movie, though, unless you're watching it to make fun of it. In which case, invite some friends over and put it on and just make fun of all the plot holes.